I'm Gregory Jackson, and I'm Associate Director for Membership and Partnership here at NAPE. And you are now in the Empowering Adult Learners Lifelong Education Upskilling web web series. We are really delighted to have you. I wanted to share with you as we get things going that NAPE is a member organization, and this is part of the member engagement activities that we do for our members. This meeting in particular is an open meeting, so there are some folks who are not necessarily members at this time, but are partners. And with membership, what we value with membership is engagement and creating member-to-member connections. I call it the 3 keys of membership, which is discover, exchanging knowledge about what works and what doesn't work in our arena; connect, which is adapting equity solutions that create and sustain new partnerships as needed; and taking action, which is implementing solutions, monitoring our progress through policy solutions, and continually improve through advocacy. So there are many dynamics to membership, and it's interactive. So it's not just NAPE provides professional learning, but we are a community that support each other, that innovate, that adapt, and we also advocate to implement policy solutions as well. NAPE engagement comes in many different forms. This is one of them, these web-based events and activities, what we call the monthly member series, which is ongoing. And we also have one-day engagement. Many of you are familiar with the NAPE Annual Summit. That's an example of one of our one-day or more kinds of events and activities that we hold. And then we have some things that are 6 months or more, which are long-term projects, and NAPE members are welcome to join our NAPE committees and be part of the framing of the work that we do throughout the year. And you'll hear and learn more about NAPE communities when we do our kind of official launch refresh of our NAPE membership page on our website, and you can learn more about different ways that you can participate in these kinds of engagement opportunities and activities. And just to give you like the nickel overview, NAPE committees are essentially different cross-functional opportunities to work with and partner with the NAPE Executive Committee. Committees are generally between 3 to 7 participants. You have a program of work, and so your work is time-bound and it's outcome-driven during that period of time. And we, meaning NAPE staff, provide the scaffolding and support around the work that you do on a committee. So we work using Google Docs, and we frame a lot of things, and we have a lot of templates that are available so that there's continuity within the work. And so we're here to support you as NAPE staff. So that's kind of the nickel tour of NAPE engagement. And certainly if you're interested or curious about other NAPE engagement opportunities, or if you're interested in becoming a member, if you've lapsed your membership or you're curious about becoming a member, feel free to reach out to myself or any other NAPE staff on the call. So as we get started here for this particular conversation, I'm going to lead into our panel in just a second, but I want to ask for your reflection. What resonates with you about this topic? What resonates with you about empowering adult learning in CTE? And if you could just take a minute and share on the chat just a word, a thought, a feeling, just what are the kinds of things that resonate with you? What brings us here? And if you could just take a minute and reflect and then share that on the chat if you can. I'll give you 1 minute. Right, I see a couple of things. Esperanza has something here from Louisiana, the capacity to change lives, families, and communities, opportunity for career growth and advancement in CTE. Dawn from Minnesota, thank you. All right, and please continue to share if you can. I'm going to continue to move on. So here's today's agenda, pretty straightforward. I'm going to turn it over in just a second to Brittany Brady, NAPE's CEO, and we'll introduce the panel. And Brittany will moderate the panel, and we'll have our panel talk. And then there will be some time for you to share out. All of our meetings are interactive, so there's Q&A, but it's also an opportunity for share what your experience has been within this particular area. And so this is an opportunity for sharing as well as Q&A for the panel. And then lastly, there will be a reminder of our final meeting for this calendar year. We're going to have more meetings, of course, but in December, we're doing humanizing data in CTE. So that should be an interesting topic. So I'm going to turn it over now to NAPE CEO, Brittany Brady, who will introduce our guests and our guest panel.
Thank you, Gregory, and it's great to see everyone today. I hope everyone is having a great day, whether it's morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. And we have a really strong panel here with us. And so I'll be spotlighting each of my esteemed panelists as I announce their name and title. Up first, we have John Makovich, Dean of the Community Learning Center, continuing in community education, Miracosta College, all the way from California. Welcome, John. I'm glad you're here with us today.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I believe we're awaiting one of our panelists. So we also have Antoine Hicks, Director of Workforce Training from the Center for Workforce Inclusion. Thank you, Antoine, for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me as well.
Absolutely. And then lastly, we have Kathy Albin, one of our esteemed executive committee members, Director of Learning Support for Spokane Falls Community College of the beautiful state of Washington. And I see we have somebody else from Seattle in the chat. So shout out to Washington. Thank you, Kathy, for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. Well, I won't take up too much time in getting us prepared. Everybody here on the panel is an expert. I am just happy to be in you all's wonderful company. And so I'll get us started with an opening question, which is, what role do you believe lifelong learning plays in the success of adult learners in the field of career and technical education?
I'll start. Why not? I put it like this. Raise your hand if you feel like you're older than Google, older than the internet, right? My generation particularly, grew up at the cuspice of technology. Our children, our grandchildren, our young adults, that's the only life they know. Like if I wanted to look up aardvarks, I'm in an encyclopedia flipping back and forth, right? And if you didn't see that change coming in education and lifelong learning, reskilling and upskilling and everything we do, the integration of technology, then you would find yourself always running behind it. And now with the introduction of AI, ChatGPT, that adds another layer that not only do we have to reskill and upskill ourselves as learning providers, we have to prepare our students, participants, job seekers for that same environment. And the only way that they're going to take ownership of that learning is to find comfort in a world that's not built for them, right? Or the world that's to come. So lifelong learning will always be a part, especially with career technology education, because that is going to be the workforce that's prevalent, period.
I guess I'll jump in real quick. I want to piggyback off of a couple things that Antoine said. So an interesting curveball, right, could be that, with the advancement of AI, that what we think of as technology careers are less high tech, right, in the future. And so the concept of career technical education, really I think is going to broaden over the years and will include, a better understanding of language, for example, language models. And so and it's an ever fluid space. And so I think that the thing that I want to emphasize that's really important to our adult learners is that lifelong cycle: learn, work, learn more, unlearn, work more, learn more, and continuing down that path, and making sure that our institutions and our CTE programs, but all of our programs as they interweave, are aimed at a population that it's almost like we need to think of students as members, that they're a member of our organizations for years and years and years to come, for their life, and they have an opportunity to continue to dip in and access that learning and relearning. And then how can we be there when students need to unlearn or relearn? How do we bring them back in, and how do we make that space? And so I think that that's probably one of the biggest roles that we play, is we have to be really, to Antoine's point, we have to be really forward looking. We have to be predictive, and that's hard to do. But, most importantly, we have to be there for students who come and go perhaps multiple times in their life journey.
I appreciate you mentioning that about the cyclical nature of life's journey, right? You learn, you work, you learn, you work. It's an ongoing, really, truly cycle. I'm curious about, and I welcome Kathy to answer this as well with a more narrative version of the question, but curious about, as people are thinking of, sorry, my computer is frozen. Okay. What support systems have been effective in assisting adult learners as they're going along this cycle, as they're acquiring new skills and navigating challenges of re-entering, exiting the workforce, upskilling, reskilling? What support systems have proven effective? What innovations have you observed or employed? Curious about how we're making sure that we are offering additional supports along that cyclical journey. And Kathy, I welcome you to answer that, and then anyone else on the panel that feels it resonates.
Yes, thank you so much. So the role that I'm currently playing as the Director of Learning Support has seen this support system in full force. I will have to say, in being in education for 25 years myself, there are some things that have remained unchanged. And to me, that is relationship development and being able to support students through every part of their journey, and knowing that they have a team surrounding them for all of their needs: academic coaching, for workforce transitions, for career education, looking, at jobs while they're going to school, after they're exiting school, internship opportunities. But it's knowing that there's somebody that's right there at their side along this journey. And that to me has not changed in the 25 years that I've been an educator. And I think that that is a critical piece. And what was mentioned by the other panelists this morning is, on that cyclical journey, how do we support them? We listen, we provide the support that they need, we provide the wraparound service and the holistic part that is part of that cyclical journey for them.
It's very rare to hear someone say holistic approach, wraparound services, follow up. Because we look at, for lack of a better word, a lot of programs right now, a lot of initiatives are just Band-Aids. We got money, we're in compliance. Well, what happens when the services are over? Where does that person go? One of the biggest things to support someone in lifelong learning with CTE is access and a plan. What's the plan for them? What does it look like? What are we investing in this? We say we want to do it. There's the funds out there to get it done. How are we using those? Are they best, you know, are we scared of the innovation that's coming? I could think of like one of my first years in adult ed, and we got to be hybrid. You have to incorporate one-on-one teaching with the learning management system. You can't just throw them in a learning management system. They're gonna revolt, and it's gonna be anarchy, right? And it took a while to beat that into my executive director's head. They're screaming for it. They're not ready. Why? They haven't had access to this type of learning before. And we have to meet them where they are. We have to understand who they are, be realistic about their barriers, their limitations. You know, andragogy was something that was written in the 70s, right? And the biggest thing they can say is it's different from K through 12. Well, what does that look like? And it's scary to find out that we're still trying to define it years later, right? Because we're pedagogy is our golden goose, but adult learners are a whole nother subgroup that needs a whole different approach, but holistic and wraparound. All of these things are very important, and the support is what breeds participation. You know, I work with a lot of federal grants, so we have to work with a lot of diverse populations that will require barriers. And support is the biggest hurdle to the life be lifing, right? I got so much going on. We get it. You know, this is a decision that you're making, and it's going to be a hard one. How can we support you? Now they own that learning, right? You remove those barriers for them because they're not going to be able to do it themselves. Not yet. We're teaching them to do it. So I'm glad that was how you ended that, because you very rarely hear holistic approach, follow up, you know.
And on that point, Antoine, I see another one of our panelists, Mike Haig, from the Industrial Training Coordinator at Sussex Tech Adult Education out of Delaware. Thank you, Mike. And Mike was listening to your answer, Antoine, and nodding his head. So I want to pause in case you have something you want to add there, Mike, about, you know, holistic and wraparound services, as well as how do we make sure that we're supporting adult learners as they go along that journey.
Hey everybody, how are you? Oh, good to see you. And I was nodding my head. I think everything that was said, and to just second, you know, Anton's, you know, agreement with, you know, the holistic approach, the wraparound services, the barrier bustings required by Fed grants, and that the adult learner is definitely a different student. And the idea is that I think the values of an adult learner are completely different than, say, someone in the secondary side. And I really think that inclusive of that holistic approach is that warm, I'd say, the warm services, right? It's not, you know, it's not, you know, it's not a handoff. It's not a cold email or a phone call or a web interface. It's that, you know, one-on-one caseworking with that student really seems to ensure success. And I really think that's, you know, that's equity in itself, right? Is that, you know, you're in conversation with your student, your adult student, and you're learning about that specific student's barriers, needs, the supports they require, and their story and what they bring to your institution, right? And that's an asset. And then it becomes this partnership in completing the training. And it's very rewarding to, you know, have someone enroll, work through your process, and really they feel who you are. They see that you're invested, equity driven, and they understand your mission, your vision. And then I think that partnership, which is a huge piece of that holistic approach, really ensures that successful completion for that lifelong learner.
I'd like to add real quick too that, you know, I really like the sort of key words I'm hearing here, and that you mentioned partnership. One of the challenges, I think, in education, and we see this in higher education a lot, is that, you know, we've done this work for, you know, a long time, right? Institutions have, you know, we know we're the experts, we know how to develop courses and improve curriculum and do all that. We're in a day and age where that's becoming less valuable. That's, you know, and so we have to get out of our own way in to some extent. And the other thing is, how do we build agency amongst our student population? I think in adult education, we're really generally good at doing that, but we need students to start to steer what we are delivering. We're not delivering to them, and you mentioned partnership, we're delivering with them, right? So, you know, to what extent do their stories, their experiences, their challenges shape how and what we deliver, and how can we make that as fluid as possible? And the other thing I think that's been a real success for us is, and this is probably for all of you as well, is whenever we've gone in intentionally with that partnership, whether it's partnership with a cohort of students and or partnership with an employer, we get a much better designed system of both educational content and supports those wraparound services again, right? And so our most successful programs are the ones where we design the program by initially meeting with the students, developing an interest-based cohort, identifying before they even enrolled what some of the challenges and barriers were, meeting with the employer, co-designing some of the program content. Those are the programs that continue to keep the level of support for our students up and get them into meaningful jobs when they're done. So it's a lot of trial and error, right? And I think we all do that, but that trial and error is super valuable. And I really think that we need to lean into our students to build their agency in the design of a lot of these programs.
John, I love that. And you're definitely speaking NAPE's language currently. And I see one of our team members in the chat saying, I appreciate this focus on partner relationships, because I often say, people say, if you build it, they will come. But if they're there building, they're already there, right? And so if they're part of that co-creation process, that means that their needs are what are being centered, and that you're able to develop something. That's why it sees more sustainability. That's why it sees better uptake and better retention, because people are focused on the fact that I was here. I built this program. I built this support service. I advocated for it. I'm trusting that my relationship now with this institution, employer, whatever, is now a little bit stronger because of that. I love that, but also we know in partnership with adult learners, there are challenges that they sometimes face, right? Antoine jokingly said, you know, how do you address the life be life thing? Like, life happens, especially with adult learners. And so curious about what you all have done to help support the challenges or help them navigate the challenges that adult learners face, especially when thinking about the intricacies of the workforce and post-secondary education systems. Do I get a certificate? What does this translate to? Is it an apprenticeship? Is it an internship? What exactly am I going to have access to when I complete this credential or this training program? So anyone can jump in there. I see a couple of head nods, so I won't dictate.
Ooh, I got something. I got something really cool. So the main thing I do is career and technical and apprenticeship training. Well-established system, right? It's just is what it is. It's been, and this is the way it's been done. And so it's a big mountain to move. It's national, right? And you know, in my county, and typically in apprenticeship training, once you start it, you have to complete it, right? And how does that serve an adult learner where, like what Antoine said again, right? Like, I agree, like life just happens to our adult learners, and there's hard choices: pay my bills or get my apprenticeship training, right? Take care of my children or finish my apprenticeship training, take care of my grandmother, my father. I mean, there's all these things that happen. And I do think they happen at the secondary level too. I think they're not as the I don't know how to say that right, because they're all very important, but I think you're protected at the secondary level more from maybe your parents or grandparents, and there's a little bit more support system there. It's all on you, right, as an adult. And so like I really worked hard to take a look at our system and say, if a learner has to leave, is it right for them to lose everything they've done, right? Can they stop and start? And so what I've tried to do is I try to develop my system in blocks. That way, if I have someone that has to leave for whatever reason, you're not going to lose that learning, right? You can pick up, if you left second block, you can pick up second block next time around, right? Offer multiple opportunities to enroll and pick up that block. It's a lot harder to manage. It costs a little bit more money. It is logistically challenging for us. It's so much easier to say, sorry, see you next year, right? And so to shift that, I really think I'm really proud of that which we've done in Delaware, where I am and other institutions are looking at that to say, hey, there should be an opportunity to exit and re-enter if something happens to our adult learners.
One of the
Thanks for
are
letting me
those
get that
blocks?
out there because I really
No,
want.
I
I'm
love
proud of that.
How long are the blocks, Mike, for all the learners in the audience?
What's that?
I said, what's the time? What's the time on the blocks? How much time of
Usually,
learning is?
usually it's 72 hours, 72-hour blocks. That seems to fit our system well. The next level may be like marking period blocks, right? So I just don't know if we have the capacity right now to manage that. I think because the system is very employer driven, it's supported by employers, state agencies, community-based work. We have all those supports in place. The have to start and finish a year later was extremely challenging. By doing those 72-hour blocks, we've really moved that mountain quite a bit. And I think if we see a need to go to a smaller chunk of time, we may be able to do that with maybe some increased funding. But yeah, that's been a really, really neat thing to see with my students.
That's something to be proud of. Antoine, I think you wanted to weigh in there.
Yeah, one of the first structures we put together, we were opening an adult charter school here in Ward 8 in Washington, D.C., one of the first of its kind, really. I had the luxury of working with a great executive director who had a vision for adult learning in the underserved communities here in Washington, D.C. And one of the things we wanted to do was make sure that there was support on multiple different level fronts. So you had the initial interaction the student would have with the learning lab manager. Then you had a student success specialist that they would meet with, and that would be more like the case manager. So they was referring them to the services they need, helping them with their TANF requirements, helping them with transportation. And we were buying Metro cards to make sure people could get to school if necessary. And then once they, either they were pursuing GED or maybe they was pursuing, workforce development training. Once they completed that, then the student success specialists, along with, we had another layer of like support. I'll say this because it was the first time I've seen an organization invest that money into the staff necessary to pull all that off. And I see that not happening a lot. They try to do a lot with less. And I know that everyone can't throw a money approach at it like that. We were very lucky. We had the luxury of, being looked at and institutionalized as a charter school. So we were able to get a lot of additional funding. Plus, our lady was out there snatching bucks up. And when you can't duplicate that model, what's the closest you can get to it, right? How can you organize your structure so that they're getting different tiers of support in different places, so that you're really blocking out all the life that's happening? You're giving them no more excuses, right? I mean, there's always going to be one. Trust me, I could tell you some stories. There's always going to be one, but how do you properly support them? Like where do you see the holes? And it's a mirror. It's a mirror. You got to put the mirror to your organization and say, who are we serving? What is the purpose of we serving? Why are we doing this? Right? And if you answer all these questions and you still can't figure out how to support them, then you're probably not doing what you're supposed to be doing. So I that's my first approach when I'm looking at systems and trying to create these structures. Right now, even what I'm doing here at Workforce, we're creating a digital inclusion training for older job seekers. right? We had the first iteration of it in the last program year. We listened to everything that we heard from our job seekers and our organizations we support, and we completely flipped it, right? So now we have to reestablish those different support systems because now they look different because the training model is different. But that's the innovation, that's the change, that's the dynamic environment you got to be open to and willing to really invest in, whether it's time and or money.
Often both. With that being said, oh, go ahead,
Yeah,
Kathy.
could I just go ahead and share really quick, Brittany? So I had the opportunity back in 2008. I had just moved up to northern Idaho, North Idaho, from down in the Sun Valley area. And I was a K-12 educator, and there was not a lot of job opportunities when I moved up north. And one of the positions that I applied for was a NAPE coordinator, actually program manager for the Coeur d'Alene tribe. And I went in and sold myself, and I talked about that relationship building and how important that is for the success of students. And the director took a shot on me, hired me. It was my first introduction to Perkins work. If you're not familiar with NAPTEP, it is the Native American Career and Technical Education Program under Perkins. And we started thinking about ways that we could design programs or get adult students engaged. So we did a local needs assessment with the tribal organization, and we went to each of the different tribal departments and we asked them, you know, what are your needs? And we did a couple of things. One of the really, well, there was actually two really creative outcomes from that. One of them was an Associate of Applied Science degree in business leadership. And it was divided out into different areas of professional and technical competencies that were directly related to the tribal needs of each of those departments. But the other really exciting thing that happened that is still to this day, one of the most exciting things that I have taken part in my career, was we brought down a welding technology program in partnership with our local community college and our K-12 public school in Plummer, Idaho. And it just happened. I was walking up to work with high school students, and I saw a help wanted sign at a mining. They built massive mining equipment. So if you can imagine, right, this is a massive mining equipment down on the Coeur d'Alene tribe, which has destroyed the lake with pollution, right? The mining, but they are down on the reservation running a large company building huge mining equipment. And I saw a sign that said help wanted. And I went back and I'm like, why are we not tapping into that? And so we partnered with North Idaho College, our local community college, and the high school, and we brought a welding technology program down to the reservation. And the rewarding work, the wraparound service, the holistic support was happening before we even had words to describe what was going on there. And it was about relationship building. We would have soup night once a week. We intimately knew each other's families. We attended weddings and funerals together. But it was really about that journey, John, that you had mentioned at the very beginning. It was all about going through that journey together. These students were coming in with, has not been in school for many, many years, had to relearn how to do math, and everybody just worked in partnership in trying to get these students through this welding technology certificate program. And it was so successful that half of the first cohort went on to get their Associate of Applied Science in welding technology.
Wow.
So I think it's all about everything that everyone on here has mentioned so far. And Mike, I love your passion about that, right? I mean, that's the exciting pieces in our job every day.
It is.
You know, I'll add something Brittany had mentioned about, I think at the beginning you mentioned credentials or different ways of credentialing. And one of the other things that I think that we're starting to do, that just barely starting to do, but I think it's already showing some signs of real promise, is to utilize digital credentialing and utilize alternative credentials to make the certification process more fluid. But the only way to do that effectively is to start by getting the partnerships with local employers and getting them to be willing to hire people not on having to have the traditional degree, right? Degree or certificate. So that's a multi-year process that's going to take a long time, but that goes back to that partnership piece again, and really trying to make sure that the businesses can look at recognizing the skills that individuals are gaining in their journey and getting them right into work right away, rather than having to wait for some completion.
There's so much value in work-based learning, right? With the amount of knowledge and skills that you're able to acquire from being in the work, I think is critical. Before we transition to taking questions from the audience, so audience, please keep in mind, we do want to hear from you. We want to know what questions you have for these brilliant folks here on the panel. But before we open it up to that, I want to make sure that each of you has a chance to share any key takeaways or recommendations to offer to the folks here on the call to further empower adult learners through lifelong learning in the realm of CTE and really beyond. I've heard a lot of different things: relationship building, being thoughtful about how they're incorporated in planning, but really we do a lot at NAPE in terms of sharing promising practices and a community of support. And so most folks on the call are practitioners. And so I imagine they are, like I am, taking notes and reminding myself that stop and start especially is going to stick with me for a long time in terms of how they're able to engage Mike. So thank you for sharing that. But any key takeaways and recommendations, and I want to invite each panelist to share at least one takeaway or recommendation as we close the panel.
I'd say if I've got more than one, so so really do a landscape analysis. Figure out who you are, figure out who your people are, who you serve, what their needs are, come up with a mission, come up with how you define equity, right? Really get that front facing, this is who we are out there. And when you do that, and when we did that, there's a lot of objective people in our system. How are we going to do that, Mike? Right? And then you get there together, right? Your students help build it. They're already there, right? I love that analogy, right? And I think if there's one main thing, landscape analysis, mission, vision, values, who are we? What do we believe? And then that'll drive your work. And I'm all in apprenticeship, on the job training, work-based learning models. I think the best way to take theory and put it into practice is to practice it. And so it's such a strong model. And that buy-in that's been mentioned from employers, it is huge when you develop a system that supports the theory and the scientific knowledge needed to do a job. And then to actually do that stuff during the day under a master technician, under a well-trained individual, it really creates a very strong learning system. So those two things, I think, really, if you're going to take something away today, is figure out who you are, who you're serving, and front face, what you believe, and then you use a hands-on learning model to reinforce what you're teaching. That's that partnership. That's that buy-in. That's that strength and community. So those are the two things that I would leave with today.
I would say the very first question you have to ask yourself is, how do I tailor the education to the learning needs of the adults I serve? First question. Everything after that is, what do you plan to do to meet that? Like he said, have a mission, have a vision, have a goal. Who are you serving? What are their barriers, right? What is the tried and true practices? What are some of the ones that didn't work, and how can you improve on them, right? Be open, be honest, and care. We are so compliance based. We're so numbers driven. We're so data driven. We remove the human experience. I have to remind my hires up, these are not numbers on a chart or a spreadsheet. These are people. And people are X factors. Right? And we can drive the numbers, we can drive the data for funders, but we have to create the most positive experience, or there is no buy-in to this program whatsoever.
I love what both. Oh, I'm sorry, Antoine.
No, I'm just saying you could run the most terrible program. You can run the most terrible program, but they will remember how you treated them more than the program was terrible. That's adults. They'll
Yes.
come back. They'll come back for the most horrible ramp. It's amazing because how you make them feel.
So I'll just add real quick. I really like that the feeling component of that, and what I was going to talk about is kind of the biggest takeaway is establish community. Make certain that, and it kind of goes back to that membership model I was describing earlier. You know, make sure that people feel that they're a member of something, that they belong to something, that they know to come back. They know they can come back. And it kind of is exactly what Antoine was saying with relationships. Make sure that they know you care, you know, and that there's that connection, and then continue to bring them back, even if they're not ready to take another full course. Maybe it's with events, maybe it's with other things that keep them glued in as part of the community. And I think that part of the reason that's also important is because we need former students to continue to drive the shape of what our programs look like based on their successes and their challenges. And so keeping them attached is, I think, really important. So I would just say community.
I am going to absolutely 100% concur with everybody on this panel and just share again, Antoine, you talked about the holistic support. I think that that is critical, critical, critical. When we were preparing for this today, I had started reflecting on some of the welding technology story that I was sharing, looking back at pictures, right? The welding technology program happened in 2011, was our first cohort. So 12 years ago. And I took a picture with my phone of one of our times together, and I sent it because I'm still connected with every single one of those students. We actually lost one of them to cancer, but I took a snapshot of my screen in my office this morning and I sent it to him. And this, I think, just describes what all of you are talking about. He wrote back and said, I was thinking about you over the past week. I miss you so much, Kathy. Hope all is well with you and your family. I wish you and your family the very best for holidays. I am still here, doing well, doing the work. I love you and all that you did for me and my family. I will make time to come see you, and I will text you and make sure that you're available, with a little winky eye, right? And it ends with a heart. And I think that that is what it's all about. And everybody on this screen just shared from different aspects what that means.
Wow. How am I supposed to follow that up, Kathy? You know, truly, I mean, that is why we do the work, right? Mike does the work for those students that are like, wow, I'm able to complete this credential in spite of life happening, right? Antoine is thinking about older learners. Everybody on this panel is thinking about how do we make sure we're really supporting people along their pathway and making sure that we're seeing human beings for all that they have to offer, right? As much as workforce is centered around what employers need, human beings have something to offer, right? There's alignment and synergy that can be found there, so long as we're seeing the human beings that are present. So I just really appreciate you all sharing today. So many things that you said have been really in alignment with what we share as part of our equity values and our practices here at NAPE. And I'm sure that everybody in the audience learned a lot. And so I want to make sure folks in the audience, if you have a question to ask that you feel comfortable doing so, feel free to put it in the chat, or you can send it to myself or Gregory Jackson. But I know at least one person has a question. So I'll give you all a moment to ask any questions that you have. And while we're waiting on the question, I love doing one word kind of feelings. So I want to ask each of you on the panel, when you know an adult learner is empowered and you had something to do with it, or you cultivated an environment to make that possible, what feeling comes over you? One word.
Purpose.
Grateful.
Beautiful.
Happiness.
Yeah, I was going to echo what happiness, or what Esperanza said in the chat, joy.
Joy. Indeed. Thank you all so much. And I'll go ahead and ask another question if we don't have one in the chat before I transition it back to Gregory, especially because I know I had a specific question I was curious about how you all were answered that I wasn't able to get to. But we talked a little bit about the digital learning environment, micro-credentialing, et cetera. Curious about how we can leverage technology to enhance lifelong learning experiences. Antoine mentioned something that I found really important, which was the LMS. You can't just throw someone into a learning management system, right? You need to think about additional support. So what are some ways that we can really leverage technology to support our adult learners? And as Esperanza put in the chat, AI, and I absolutely agree. If adult learners aren't afraid of it, that we can use it to make sure that I'm a little afraid of it. That's a bias that I hold. But you know, I think it's something that can definitely supercharge folks in their application of their skills. So I want to open that up to the panel in case anybody has any insight there.
As a person who's always dealt in digital and technology training, one of the things I will have to say is, one, be open to it. Be the lifelong learner yourself. There's going to be a lot of different things that are going to come your way that are fearful and new, right? But even with AI, there has to be a human component, right? I think about the Hidden Figures movie. You know, they look and they saw those computers coming, they saw their jobs leaving, and she said, I'm going to learn this so that I can teach them, because somebody has to run this, right? I think what you can do is find out how technology affects what you do, what you train. Where are the burgeoning opportunities for the technology in your industry? Because everything is moving that way, right? And I don't really, like, I don't work in light industrial, right? But I think about how technology might affect that, right? And so then you need to start, what are those transferable skills, right? Because they'll say, I don't know none of this. Yeah, you do. You have to relate it. You have to make it relatable for them and say, this is why you're going to be okay with this. This is just like doing this. What are those transferable skills? And then just find ways to just keep at least a pinky in technology, and keep, you know, slow feed that, integrate that into your systems, integrate that into how you do things, get them involved. Make their processes deal with technology, teach them how to do it. You know, if it comes even with something like registering, right? Or seeking out information, teaching them how to search for information, credible information at that, right? Get them involved. Like I say, hey, in my digital learning classes, hey, we're gonna get our hands in the sandbox because we can't break it, right? So provide opportunities for them to touch it, feel it, right? You'd be surprised. I work with older adults. You'd be surprised how many older adults already are using technology on a daily basis, just from using their phones. Can't get my mom off Facebook for anything. Swear I tried my best. She's using emojis now. It's weird, but I love it for her, right? Because that's one less thing I have to teach her. And I've been teaching. My mom was my first adult learner, right? I grew up with technology. She survived 30 years in the tobacco industry with barely a community college education, right? But to see her now, she has internet in her house. She brought her a laptop, right? She's sending me screenshots of things. It's funny and it's cute, but what I see is a 71-year-old woman who's not scared of technology now.
Right.
She's using it in her everyday life. And that's what we're doing here at the center. We're not going to make you super job ready right now, but we are going to make you a bit more competitive. And we're going to keep chipping away until you can build the life and the job that you want, or the career that you want, or maybe just be more comfortable with technology altogether. And I think when we look at how we do that, we have to model what we want to show them. Right. If we're telling them to use technology, we have to use it. We got to get away from these inundated systems, all this paper, right? And then we have to bring them along with us. That's my spiel.
I was just going to add, I think some of the greatest moments are that vulnerability with students to sit alongside them. And I just had a student come in yesterday to fill out a basic food application for, in the state of Washington. And I sat down next to them and we muddled our way through the process. And they looked at me and they're like, "You don't know how to do this?" And I said, "Not very well, but we're going to get through it together and we're going to figure it out." And I think that admitting and showing that as a Gen Xer, I don't know all I should about technology, but I'm willing to sit and work through it with you.
You know, I'll Gregory in the chat asked a question that I think is really important to this conversation. You know, how do we address the barriers to tech access for adult learners and ensure inclusivity? So I'm going to combine both questions a little bit because, and I'll share a story. So pre-pandemic, so first of all, I started my job here at MiraCosta College on April 6, 2020. So if you can think about when the pandemic started, it was like a couple weeks after most of the lockdowns, right? So onboarding in that time was very strange. But one of the things that I learned very quickly upon coming in was that our adult education program was entirely in person pre-pandemic. There was maybe one or two online classes for some tangential, coursework, but it was entirely on campus. And so the pandemic, of course, moved everything online. But what we've learned after then is we need both, right? And I think all of our institutions probably have come to realize that. But we're doing it, I would say, precisely because of what Gregory's asking. Some of our students are not ready for, nor particularly interested in utilizing technology to access their learning. And others have not been able to attend classes at in our program previously because we didn't have the access points of online, right? Transportation issues, any number of barriers that prevented them from getting to where we were. So I think, leveraging technology, kind of, and Antoine sort of touched on this, appropriately when it's appropriate, at the right times for the right populations, and continuing to learn how to do that right. We trip over ourselves many times in that process, but we're continuing to try to refine based on what the students are needing, and also to not end up in that, or to minimize the number of times we end up in that trap that Antoine brought up at the very beginning. Students getting into a Canvas shell and not having an instructor that maybe is the best at navigating that space with them. So it's a continued learning process, but that's been a big lesson for us. We're on track to, probably end up with 1.5 times the number of students we had pre-pandemic, if not more, because we've opened that online space, that online door for our students.
Wow.
I would definitely say to address barriers to tech and ensure inclusivity is to remove them yourself. If you are a program and you're offering training, reskilling, upskilling, workforce development, education, you invest in technology and you pass that down to your job seekers, your participants, your students. Model what you telling them what the world is going to be outside of it. Create that world for them in that learning environment before you send them out there.
Well, thank you again, Antoine, John, Kathy, Mike. It's been really a pleasure to speak with you all today. I appreciated you all's nodding affirmations while everybody was sharing. I think people really gleaned a lot from this conversation today. I'm going to bring Gregory back up to close us out, but I just wanted to make sure you all felt my gratitude. It was really easy to moderate this conversation with you all's passion and real intention for learners. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to echo Brittany's thanks for everybody on the call. There's a couple of folks who I also want to acknowledge LaCandice Ochoa from California, who helped with framing this conversation going way back. She's what we call one of our pace setters, and she's contributed to this conversation and help bring John into the conversation. And so we really appreciate her for her role in that. And also Jonathan Wickert from Delaware, who also is part of what we call our pace setters group here at NAPE, who are NAPE members who they're the ones, and through the feedback from you on the call and you as moderators, are the ones that provide us feedback that help design these member meetings, these gatherings, this community. And so we're very grateful for Jonathan Wickert in Delaware for helping with framing that and bringing and introducing Mike to us from some of the work that they're doing out there. So I just want to publicly acknowledge that. I know he's not in the meeting now, but he may see the recording. And I want to let everybody know on this call that, as I mentioned earlier, all these meetings are recorded and they are provided through NAPE Equity TV on YouTube for members. So if you're not a member already, you can join NAPE and you can access all of the most current of the web meetings and these conversations and this community. And if you're not a member, there are still some from going back maybe another extra year or so, where you can see some of the earlier conversations around a range of topics that you have decided as members that you want to gather around. And so, I mean, I'm going to bring everything to a close. We're at 4 o'clock. I want to let everybody know that December 20th at 3 p.m. Eastern, we're doing our session, Humanizing Data in CTE. And there were many things that were shared during this call that kind of speak to that. And so I think it's probably an excellent segue. And like this meeting and these previous meetings, we will have a panel of folks in the field, in the community, who will be sharing on different aspects of humanizing data in CTE. It's more than just numbers. And so we want to help frame that conversation. So I will end by thanking folks. I'm going to stop recording, but I'm going to leave the meeting open for another minute or two. So if folks on the chat want to share with each other or acknowledge each other, you have that opportunity for a minute or two. If you need to go, you need to go. So again, thank you. Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, everybody on the call, and hope to see you in December.
Thank you all. Great to see everyone. Happy Thanksgiving, Esperanza.
Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you.
Happy holidays. Enjoy the week next week.